I'd like to introduce you to Faye, Sonier. She is joining us. She is Executive Director for Canadian Physicians for Life and General Legal Counsel in March of 2015. She brought to the organization 7 years of experience in the charitable sector, having previously been legal counsel for the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. She has practiced constitutional and human rights law with a special focus on freedom of religion and conscience and sanctity of human life issues. She has also lobbied, made submissions to the government, and appeared before appellate courts and Supreme Court and the Supreme Court of Canada to advocate her client's perspective on matters relating to abortion, euthanasia, and assisted suicide, and genetic and reproductive technologies. She's a regular contributor to the ProWomanProLife.org project. Please welcome Faye Sonier.
Thank you so much for having us this morning. So, can you imagine being asked to perform an abortion, or told that you needed to give someone a lethal injection, and that if you didn't, your career and your life could be in jeopardy? These are hypothetical questions for most of us, but for doctors in Ontario, these questions are reality. Their governing body, which is called the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, now requires our doctors to practice law in a manner that violates their conscience rights and their religious beliefs. Never before in Canadian histories have our doctors been put in this position. What are our pro-life doctors going to do in face of this, and what consequences are they going to face as a result of it? So, the latest round of discussions on doctor conscience rights was triggered by a 2014 media report, which you may have read in the Globe and Mail. It got another news outlets, it got a lot of coverage. It was about 3 Christian doctors in Ottawa who couldn't prescribe birth control pills because of their religious beliefs. Dr. Leva, who's actually my family doctor, who's pictured here, Dr. Tangay and Dr. Kyrillos underwent a barrage of media scrutiny. There were stories everywhere, there was journalists outside their offices, it was quite crazy. The 3 doctors worked out of a clinic together. They posted a sign in their office in their waiting room in compliance with the Code of Ethics of the Canadian Medical Association that simply stated that they could not prescribe birth control pills or any other form of contraception, as doing so would conflict with, quote, their medical judgment, professional ethical concerns, and religious values. One night, a woman went to their walk-in clinic for a birth control prescription. She saw the notice posted on the wall, she took a picture of it, and she posted it on the Facebook page of a very radical pro-choice feminist group. She then went down the street and got a prescription for that birth control pill from another doctor at another clinic. Months later, Joyce Arthur, who you may know, who is a pro-choice activist who lives in BC, filed 2 complaints against these doctors with the college. Now, it's important here to stop and consider a few things. Now, the woman who posted the picture of the sign on the Facebook wall of the feminist group did get a prescription for the birth control pills that same night from another doctor. And the person who filed the complaint against our doctors wasn't a patient of any of the 3 doctors. She had never met them. She wasn't a resident of the province of Ontario, but she was an activist who lived 4,000 kilometers away and just engaged in this procedure. Because of her complaint, the physicians underwent a very taxing inquiry. It was quite extensive, but thankfully they were found not to have broken any rules because they had acted in compliance with their college's policy. Now, at the same time, and surprisingly unrelated, the College of Physicians and Surgeons reviewed their same policies on conscience rights. The college developed this policy in 2015, which requires doctors, in the most extreme of cases, to perform procedures that are contrary to their religious beliefs or their conscience rights, and in all cases to refer for them. For example, in some cases it would require, say, a pro-life doctor to perform an abortion, but in all cases to refer for them. The CPSO, the college, also recently passed an interim guideline dealing specifically with assisted suicide and euthanasia, and it requires, again, physicians to refer for the procedures. For many doctors, to refer for procedures such as these that violates their conscience rights or their religious beliefs is to be complicit in the performance of the act. They can't do it. So what does the law say? Every Canadian benefits from protections granted from human rights laws, such as the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, protection from state coercion to act contrary to your conscience rights or your religious beliefs. As Canadians, doctors, of course, benefit from this protection. Second, provincial human rights laws prohibits discrimination on a number of grounds, from creed, disability, race. Again, both doctors and their patients benefit from these protections. Let's stop and consider an important point again. These laws don't create a human right to demand specific services from specific service providers, such as demanding that a specific doctor perform a specific procedure such as abortion. And let's use another example just to drive this home. If a restaurant chooses not to serve pork because of the owner's religious beliefs, there's no human rights violation, obviously. But if the restaurant chooses to exclude someone, from a certain ethnic group, that is discrimination, and that is a violation of human rights law. It's the same thing for physicians who are unable to perform certain procedures or prescribe certain drugs. They're not discriminating against patients. They're discriminating between drug classes and procedures. There's a big difference there, and this gets lost in the discussion. But to tell one of our doctors that they can't practice medicine because of their religious beliefs or their consciences is a clear case of discrimination. It's very black and white. Now, we also need to consider the Supreme Court of Canada's decision in Carter, which is the case that legalized assisted suicide and euthanasia. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot about that from Alex and Alberto later on. In its decision, as you can see here, I underlined it, the court stated that nothing in its decision would compel doctors to administer assisted suicide, but that the colleges, Parliament, and the provinces needed to work out the details. The court also emphasized that doctors and their patients' rights need to be reconciled. What does that mean, of course? And then, most recently, I'm sure you heard last week, the federal government introduced Bill C-14, which of course has implications again for physician conscience rights. Albertus will talk about that a little bit in his talk. But all this, of course, falls within the context of our Canadian society. We live in a plural society, and under the Charter, it places a high value on multiculturalism. As such, it should be inclusive of all people, including doctors who hold to certain beliefs. And in a multicultural society, physicians appreciate the opportunity to see their values reflected back at them from the medical system and by their medical professionals. For example, patients will often seek out doctors who share their perspectives on certain issues. Myself, I have health issues, and it's taken me years, but I've assembled a team of 3 doctors who all happen to be specialists in my areas, but also pro-life, and that's really important to me. Another example is, of course, when Bill C-14 becomes law, it's not going to be surprising to find people who are going to seek out pro-life doctors who refuse to engage in assisted suicide or euthanasia, in whom to trust their family members. They're going to feel safer with their family members, their vulnerable family members, being cared for by these doctors. They're going to want doctors who hold to the traditional Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. And in the end, of course, to prevent physicians from one worldview from practicing medicine is not only discriminatory, but it's going to force the medical community and medical practice in Canada to be homogenous, and it's going to fail to reflect the broader plural Canadian society. Another point that gets lost is the idea that to get along well, we all have to agree with each other. For a doctor to care for a patient, it doesn't mean that he or she has to agree with them on every single point. A physician can disagree with their patient, yet still provide quality care. An example from my husband. He wanted surgery because he snores. And so he went to see his doctor and he requested a specific procedure he had heard about. And his doctor said refused to do it because he just felt it wasn't a beneficial surgery. Now, if my husband wanted that specific procedure, he would have had to go to another doctor, get a second opinion, and get the procedure from him. He didn't in the end, but he still has a good relationship with his primary care physician, and the relationship is ongoing. Another real-world example is a woman approached her family doctor, who's one of our pro-life doctors, and she told her doctor that she wanted an abortion. The pro-life doctor told her, "I'm sorry, I can't refer for it, I can't do the procedure, I can't be involved, but I can continue to support you and your family any other care that you would like." So unfortunately, the woman went and had her abortion and then came back to continue to receive family health care from this doctor. Now, in one of the lawsuits we're going to talk about a little later, where we're challenging the college's policies on conscience rights, this pro-choice woman who had the abortion is actually submitting an affidavit in support of her pro-life doctor, saying yes, it's possible to be pro-life, to disagree with your patient, but still provide quality care. That's a really, really powerful statement. So again, we can get along well in society, even if we disagree with each other. We don't all have to agree with each other. It seems really simplistic to say that, but we clearly need to be saying this. The other issue is that there's no need to actually have doctors violate their religious beliefs or their conscience rights. There's no problem that actually needs solving here. There's been no requirement in Canada up until now for doctors to violate their religious beliefs or their consciences, and Canadians still receive quality care. A practical example is the CMA policy from 2007 on induced abortion. The policy from the Canadian Medical Association sets out that doctors don't have to perform or refer for abortions. Yet, as we know, women across the country have access to abortion without a referral. They can walk up to a clinic, ask for the procedure, and a doctor willing to perform the abortion does so. If provinces feel that additional awareness needs to be raised for access to certain procedures, such as abortion or assisted suicide or euthanasia, in this very, very connected world, they can set up hotlines, they can set up websites, there's means to do this. There's no need to require doctors to violate their consciences and their religious beliefs to do these procedures. And the point here is that the obligation for Canadians to receive quality health care or health care at all is on the state. It's not on each and every individual doctor. That's not their personal responsibility. Now, of course, the stripping of human rights from one group of citizens is, of course, going to lead to the stripping of rights from others. And the one question we can only ask ourselves at this point is, who's next? So here's a short video that addresses the fact that certain doctors feel pushed out of the practice of medicine.
Medicine moving forward. She says doctors need to look at practical solutions that respect one's conscience. In some hospitals, doctors and nurses who are not willing to carry out abortions or euthanasia on their patients are sometimes forced out of their jobs. It's a rising threat several doctors and nurses are dealing with.
We have met people who've had to lose their professions, who've had to emigrate to make a living where it is possible to honor their consciences.
This Vatican conference deals precisely with freedom of conscience. Titled Maternal Health Care and Catholic Conscience, it brings in medical specialists from all over the world so they can share experiences. It's also a way for them to learn about their rights, especially when it comes to keeping their jobs.
We must always kill the pain and suffering, but we must never kill the patient with the pain and suffering.
Sometimes these doctors and nurses are sometimes told that if they are not willing to perform an abortion or administer euthanasia because of their faith or conscience, they should have simply chosen another profession. It's a threat younger generations are also hearing, but different medical associations are fighting back.
So the pressure is on for people not to go into the sensitive areas where their consciences are likely to be forced, and especially forced by legal pursuit if they do not conform.
Margaret Somerville is an ethics professor in Canada, where legalized euthanasia is moving forward. She says doctors need to look at practical solutions that respect one's conscience.
One possibility would be to let doctors sign up on two different lists. Either you're willing to do this or you're not willing to do it, and then patients can decide which doctors they want to go to. And I choose not to go to the doctors who are doing euthanasia.
She says patients should be able to demand procedures while ignoring the conscience of doctors and nurses, especially since the ultimate goal in the medical field is to protect life and not destroy it.
So of course, groups are responding to these legal challenges, and they need your help and your support. For example, the Christian Medical Dental Society, Canadian Physicians for Life, and the Canadian Federation of Catholic Physician Societies, and 5 individual physicians have launched a legal challenge against the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, challenging their new conscience policies, which of course requires the violation of doctors' rights. Albertus is actually the lawyer on that case. It is our hope, of course, that these policies are going to be found to be unconstitutional for violating the Charter. So please give generously to these groups and spread the word about this important case. These cases are expensive. They cost over $100,000 just to run them through the various court systems, and we suspect that this will be appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada. So we're on this case for years to come. And what else was I going to touch on there? Yeah, it's a difficult case. So here's another video that I'll show quickly where Canadian pro-life doctors are talking about their concerns regarding conscience rights. It was recently filmed. 2 of the doctors in this video are 5 of the individual parties in the legal suit that I was discussing, the legal action. You can look for them. It's Dr. Gugliotta and Dr. Korvermaker. And yeah, I'll just jump to the video again.
Physicians make up a broad range of people. Every patient that I interact with has different views and beliefs on a variety of different things. I have different views and beliefs in my colleagues too, so I think it's just a matter of interacting with other patients in a respectful manner and being open to their thoughts and opinions and communicating ours in a respectful manner as well.
When I hear someone say that physicians should leave their morality at home, I don't think they mean I should leave my honesty or my compassion. What they want me to leave at home is certain moral opinions that happen to disagree with them. It's not a question of bringing morality to the bedside, but which morality we bring to the bedside.
I think if somebody cannot act as a human being or as a professional based on one's strongly held values, that causes some fundamental deterioration in who we are as a nation.
The concern with the change in policy is that my ability to both practice medicine and my religion would not be able to be supported by the college's policy on that I would be compelled to be involved in procedures that right now I am not.
I'm never going to not see a patient because they're asking for something that I don't feel comfortable giving. I'm not going to treat them any differently. I'm still going to treat them. I'm still going to explore options with them. I'm just not going to perform to do something that I feel is unethical.
To me, a letter of referral implies acquiescence or support for that request.
Currently, I'm in a work environment where my views are very strongly respected and arrangements have been made for other people to provide those services that I don't feel that I'm able to provide for my patients.
I'm concerned about the policy in that I had always thought that perhaps someday I may set up a family practice. But if the policy goes ahead, then I don't think I would set up a family practice because I would not have a way of dealing with procedures which would go against my conscience.
It kind of frustrates me because I know that in our country, rural areas are underserviced, and I feel kind of like my hands are bound in that, I may not want to pursue rural medicine if I'm not allowed to follow my conscience there.
We need every kind, caring physician who is willing to practice in rural Ontario to come to rural Ontario. And if there's particular services that they're not willing to provide, rural Ontario will find ways to ensure that those patients access those services.
I don't think the only way to ensure access for patients is to force physicians to go against their conscience.
We want patients to access services efficiently. We want physicians to practice with their moral integrity intact.
I think that this proposed policy is going to make people seriously consider whether they can continue practicing in certain disciplines within medicine or as a physician altogether. And it's unfortunate because it will push some of the most conscientious professionals out of the profession.
So as noted in this slide, you can also advocate for physician conscience rights through the website canadiansforconscience.ca. It was created by the Christian Medical Dental Society in support of Canadian Physicians for Life and the Catholic Fed. It's an advocacy tool. It's fantastic. You just punch in what province you're from. It pre-populates a letter you can edit, and then it sends it to the right decision makers in your province. Right now is a really critical time to do this because, as you know, the House of Commons and our parliamentarians are considering Bill C-14 in physician conscience rights, and we're hoping that they'll include a clause to protect nurse conscience rights, physician conscience rights, pharmacist conscience rights, and this is a means to make your voice heard. And of course, more broadly, what can we do to build a culture of life? First, of course, we should consider those in our immediate circles. Look around you. There may already be someone who needs your support, whether that's a single mom, someone who's very ill or elderly that needs support. And I would like to emphasize not to underestimate the impact your care has on creating a culture of life. Research from jurisdictions where assisted suicide and euthanasia are legal shows that due to advances in palliative care, and pain management therapies, most people don't request assisted suicide because of physical pain. They do so because of metaphysical suffering. They're losing hope. They feel alone, they fear becoming a burden on their loved ones, and they don't believe society values their lives anymore. The suffering this research describes is, of course, heartbreaking, but it also identifies a unique and important opportunity for the pro-life movement and a reason for hope. A few years ago, I attended with Alex, actually, a meeting with some of North America's leading palliative care experts. They related these research findings. And they shared while medication and mental health care will ease emotional and psychological pain, the suffering and the sick can find a great deal of comfort and symptom reduction. I want to emphasize that through practical expressions of care, of love, of support from their communities. Just the expressions of the love your neighbor principle. These measures can make a difference between suicidal patients and one who finds meaning in his or her last days. Studies like the findings from Dr. Harvey Chachanov's dignity therapy proves that the will to live is actually increased when patients are offered dignity and consideration. That makes an awful lot of sense, doesn't it? In one of his studies, he's very well known actually, you probably heard about him in the news. In one of his studies, 91% of patients said the therapy was helpful and 47% of patients said it increased their will to live. That's amazing, those are huge numbers. So what's dignity therapy? It's simply a series of conversations between a healthcare provider and a patient where the patient discusses their life, their experiences, what they accomplished, and what advice or legacy they'd like to leave for their loved ones, neighbors, and family members. To break it down really simply, dignity therapy is a showing of care, of concern, and respect, again, to our neighbor. The palliative care specialists that we spoke to were hopeful as they set out these facts, because as a community, we can actually help to pull people back from the brink of suicide. And to make a significant impact, the pro-life movement doesn't have to spend years raising funds for equipment and training. The pro-life movement can make a difference today by just being what it has always been. And responding to these cries of desperation, I think, is one of the most important calls on this generation. Other options, of course, for creating a culture of life, and this won't be news, is joining existing pro-life organizations as members, board members, volunteers, donors, or even considering a call to become a full-time staff person. The movement is seeking people with a variety of gifts, talents, and abilities, and I'll actually provide you with 3 different examples from our own charity, Canadian Physicians for Life. Dr. Laura Lewis, pictured here, is one of our board members, and even though she had no media experience whatsoever, dove into media relations. She's now our chief spokesperson on RU486 and the complications associated with abortion. Another example is the volunteer who does our copy editing. She does 2 hours a week, 2 hours a month, and she's just retired and she's battling a cancer diagnosis, but this is her way to contribute to the movement and to create a culture of life. Another volunteer is our second-year law student. She's developing all the resources for our members on their rights and their responsibilities as physicians dealing with conscience rights challenges. And of course, as you know, the pro-life movement is really and truly diverse, and there's a perfect fit for everyone. In the education wing, there's groups like Life Canada, Physicians for Life, Pro-Women Pro-Life. The spiritual wing, we've got Priests for Life, of course, National House of Prayer. The health and healing wing, we've got pregnancy care centers. like Aid to Women and Rachel's Vineyard. We've got the Political, Legal, and Lobbying Wing. You might have heard of We Need a Law, My Canada, the EPC. There's the General Advocacy Wing, which right now definitely includes the Christian Medical Dental Society, which is doing quite a bit. So there's a fit for you if you're interested in getting involved. And there's benefits, of course, to being involved in the pro-life movement. First, of course, there's the knowledge that you're helping to nudge the culture more towards the culture of life, one that values life and the inherent dignity of every life. That you're being faithful to your beliefs and your convictions and your conscience about the value of every human life. And of course, there's the community and the fellowship. My husband and I have been heavily involved with the pro-life movement for about 8 years now, and we've never met a more diverse, loving, and caring community. We feel truly, truly blessed to be part of this community. So to wrap up, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Canadian Physicians for Life and share a few words from 2 of our medical students. So CPL is the National Association of Pro-Life Doctors in Canada. We were founded in 1975 by 3 doctors, one from the Christian faith, one from the Jewish faith, and an atheist. We are explicitly non-religious, though we know a number of our members hold to religious convictions. We're unique in the public square as we're the only explicitly pro-life physician group that is non-religious, and we feel that this gives us a unique opportunity for pro-life and pro-conscience right advocacy efforts. We can share with the public that someone can come to the pro-life position from a variety of worldviews and not simply because someone holds religious views. And while we're a very, very diverse group from a wide range of beliefs and backgrounds and cultures, what is most important is, of course, what brings us together. This is a picture of a few of our students at this year's conference. And what brings us together is the belief that, quote, all human life has an inherent and irreplaceable value regardless of age or infirmity. Human life is entitled to respect from conception to natural death. As you can imagine, and for all these reasons, conscience rights are of critical importance to our members. One young doctor recently told us the following. As a radiation oncology resident with a special interest in palliative radiotherapy, a few patients have already asked me about physician-assisted suicide. I expect with time, more will follow. I believe if I side against my conscience, I would not be honest with myself, but most importantly, I am harming my patient, this current one and any future one. Because of that, I strongly believe in conscience protection, not just legally, but also an acceptance of it through the culture of medicine. In October, we held our annual conference. It's a conference that we put on that anyone from the pro-life movement can attend, but the largest number of attendees are pro-life medical students and medical residents. And they come seeking pro-life education and training and resources as they head out to what is now a very fraught terrain of Canadian medicine. This past year, for example, we spent a lot of time talking about the Carter decision, about conscience rights, about palliative care, and the future of medicine in Canada. The students who attend this conference have most of their expenses paid by our very, very generous donors who don't want a single med student or resident to be unable to attend due to finances. So as a side, if you know any medical students or residents or even doctors who'd like to attend, please refer them to our website or pick up a pamphlet. We'd love to have them. At the end of this conference, students write thank you letters to the donors to express their appreciation. I'd like to read one because it was very encouraging to me and I hope it's encouraging to you as well. Dear donor, I am so grateful for your generosity which enabled me to attend this amazing conference. It was such a powerful experience being able to connect with pro-life medical students and mentors from across the country at a forum that wouldn't have been possible without you. In fact, it even sparked the launch of our own UBC Medical Pro-Life group. This weekend was a time for learning, but most importantly, it was a time for encouragement and support. Being a medical student in today's culture is increasingly difficult as we slip into an age where even our most fundamental values are being increasingly disregarded. Specifically, the intrinsic value of every human life. Personally, this conference gave me a renewed sense of support as the leaders of Canadian Physicians for Life made sure that we all knew that they were there for us when times get difficult. As a student interested in palliative care, I know I'm going to be running into many issues that come along with my pro-life stance. But this conference gave me the confidence that I am not alone in this fight. Thank you for allowing me to attend. The pro-life medical community and the pro-life community as a whole is facing very difficult times right now, as you know. And it encourages me to see students like this one who wrote this letter, who's willing to step out and enter a field in medicine where he knows he's going to face pushback, criticism, and possibly college sanctions as a result of his pro-life position. It just reminds me that when the pro-life community comes together, we can really do great things and change the culture for good. So thank you very much.